Today's episode is with one of my assistant coach, Marc Sonnen, who played professionally for 2 years in Germany. We talk about his transition from college to pro level, what life overseas was really like, and the challenges he faced during his first season. If you ever thought about playing overseas, this is an episode you don't want to miss. Welcome to Beyond the Contract, the podcast where you go beyond the highlights and talk about the real journey of professional basketball. I'm your host, Ismail Diouf, a college athlete who got the opportunity to play in the CBL and is now working toward playing overseas. On this show, I sit down with professional players, coaches, and athletes for real, unfiltered conversation about the challenges, the lifestyle, and what it truly takes to build a career in the game. Let's get into it. Today I'm joined by my assistant coach, Marc Sonnen, who played professional basketball in Germany before transitioning into coaching. So Marc, for people who may not know your story, can you tell us a little bit more about your basketball journey?
Yeah, so it all started when I was a young kid growing up, played travel ball, youth basketball, and then I started to get more into the AAU scene. And I had a coach, Brian Sandifer, who was really big time for me as a young man. He taught me a lot, how to play the game, how to think the game. I transitioned into high school basketball where I went to Tartan High School in Oakdale, Minnesota. I played for a legendary Coach K, and he had a lot of players that have gone on to college to play. He showed me the way of how to be a basketball player and how to prepare me for college. So throughout my high school career playing for him and playing for my AAU coach, they prepared me a lot for the college level. I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to the University of Northern Iowa. I played at UNI from 2009 to 2013 for Coach Jacobson. When we had great years, especially early on, going to the Sweet 16. I knew I wanted to keep playing. So going into the professional world, I was able to get a contract in Germany, in Leverkusen, Germany, for the Bayer Giants. And so I spent 2 years overseas playing for Bayer, and it was a great experience. We weren't an amazing team, but the experience of living overseas, being in a different country, learning different cultures was something that was very important for me, and I think my growth and development as a young man. And after that, I got into basketball training in the Twin Cities. So I spent about 5 years doing that. As I was getting towards the end of my training part, I knew I really wanted to get into coaching. And so that's what kind of transitioned me into becoming a GA at UNI and a video coordinator for 3 years. And once I got done at UNI with my grad program, I knew I wanted to get into being an assistant coach. So I moved down a level. I went Division II, spent a year at University of Minnesota Duluth as an assistant coach. And then the next 2 years I spent at Drury University in Springfield, Missouri, which is a D2 school. And then an opportunity came open at UNI as an assistant coach. So this past summer, I was able to take the job here at UNI. And now I've been here for about a year now, just finishing up. And so that's a little bit of my basketball journey.
Nice. A lot of background, and I'm excited to deep down a little bit into your journey.
Oh, yeah.
And also now, my assistant coach, and we finally won a championship.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, that was a nice moment.
Oh, it was.
We
It was a
both
great
live
moment.
right now, and we're ready to dance.
Yes.
So you talked to me about your journey. So let's start from college.
I think we had a really good team. We had some ups and downs, just like any other team, and we were able to play in postseason play. I think it was a CIT tournament. But throughout that year, we played with amazing guys, had great coaches. And for me as a player, I was able to push a lot of my game, probably the furthest my senior year, the type of player I became as a shooter, and was able to do a lot as far as being able to obviously make shots, but also help my teammates out defensively. And then being more of the leader and the vocal guy on the floor was my main role on my team my senior year. Once I leave the University of Northern Iowa, I wanted to leave some sort of legacy. Obviously, when you play, you're going to showcase your skills, you're going to help your teammates, but how do you help the guys that come after you? So a big part of me as I got older was some of the younger guys we had on our team, being able to take them under my wing, show them what I did, sometimes getting them in the gym and showing them different things. And so when I left, I had a guy named Matt Bohannon who was a couple years younger than me. And we spent a lot of time in the gym shooting, getting on the gun, working out together on our own. And we formed a great relationship because of that. And he was able to take that. Once I left, he was able to not only become a really good shooter, probably one of the best shooters that has ever come here, but he was able to do that with the next group of young guys. And that's something that Coach Jake talked to me about when I was young. I had a guy named Ali Farouk. He took me under his wing when I was a freshman. He was a senior. He showed me a lot about how to work out, how to grow as a player, what are the things you can do to keep getting better. And then it was up to me once he left to be able to not only get in the gym and do all the hard work, but then being able to help the next generation of UNI players. It's something that's been passed down a lot of times with shooters, especially that have come here, of being able to use guys that have come before you as an example of how you can push it to the next level. And I think we've had a group of guys over the last 20 years for Coach Jake that have been able to even push it further and further every year.
Yeah, and you definitely show it a lot for us. Like, you've been a big part of why we are in the March Madness right now. Like, your culture and how you communicate with the team is really important. It shows a lot for us, especially. You were talking about your college career.
Yeah, it's a good question. I knew I probably wasn't going to be a guy that when I got done was going to work an office job and sit in a chair and wear a suit and tie. And so I knew coaching was always going to be something I wanted to do, but I also knew I wanted to try to see how far I could push it. As a young kid, I wanted to play in the NBA, and so that was always my goal. I want to make it to the NBA, and I think, shooting for the stars and landing on the moon, I was able to put myself in a position to have a small amount of time in a pro career overseas. And it was something that I also knew I wanted to travel. Being able to play overseas, you got a little bit of both worlds. You got to play professionally, but you also got to be able to travel and see a different part of our world. I think getting outside of the U.S. and living in a different country, learning a different culture, it opens up your eyes and shows you a different side of things. I'm also, my family originally comes from Germany, so I was able to go back to a little bit of where my heritage is from and learn a little bit about the history of, and I think that was also something cool that it happened to be Germany that I played in. You never know where you're going to end up professionally when you play overseas. It happened to work out that I got to go back to where my family is originally from. So I think having the ability to keep playing, which is something as I got better, I think in college, it became something that I knew I could have the chance to do. It didn't mean it was going to for sure happen. I knew putting all the work in that I did in high school and college, it put me in a position to be able to have that choice. And so getting an agent, having somebody that helped me navigate the whole professional world made it a lot easier, because communication from here to overseas is obviously easier now with technology and all that, but it isn't always as easy as knowing where to go. And there's a lot of places overseas that maybe aren't the best places to be playing professionally wise. And you'll hear a lot of sometimes horror stories about guys not getting paid or things not always going perfect. But I was fortunate to play for a company in Bayer that really did look after their players. We had a great coach. We had a great program. We didn't win how we wanted to win, but they allowed me to not only make some money playing basketball, but be able to meet people and form relationships that are going to last a lot longer than just a season.
How you got into the professional world, but like something grabbed my attention when you said land to the stars and land to the moon.
Yep.
Did you ever think about getting the NBA before?
Oh, yeah. So it was something as a kid growing up. I was a big Allen Iverson fan. I became a big LeBron James fan. And so seeing and watching the NBA, it was always something as a young kid. I had the basketball in my hands watching the games. You always want to have some sort of dream or goals to have as a young kid. But even as you get to high school, as you get to college, you want to be able to have those dreams. And sometimes we're afraid to have big dreams because we're afraid to fail. But I think if you really feel positive about something and something's really important to you, I think you're willing to go above and beyond to try to reach those goals. And I'll be the first one to tell you, I failed at my main goal. I didn't make the NBA, but I think me putting myself in a position to try to get there, it allowed me to then play overseas. Where if my goals were, I want to go play overseas, maybe I don't end up playing overseas because I didn't put my goals so high or my dreams so high. So I think my ability to recognize that failure is not a bad thing, it's just a lesson. And all the hard work that you put in through the journey is what's got to be most important. I think sometimes we always focus on the end goal of everything, and we don't really look at everything that happened in between, from when you start thinking about your goals and your dreams and when you either accomplish or fail at them. We don't look at all the time in between, that the journey that you spend, the time that you spend in the gym, the time that you spend watching film or the weight room or conditioning. I think all that stuff prepared me for when I finally got the opportunity to play overseas, I was going to be prepared for that. But shooting to try to get to the NBA was definitely one of my goals. Now, I didn't get a G League invite. I didn't get a Summer League invite. I was a good college player. I wasn't a great college player. And so I knew if I did want to try to get and still reach that end goal, I was going to have to take the overseas route and try to prove myself. And it didn't happen, but I think because of what I learned and the hard work and the sacrifice I learned along the way, it did, one, put me in a position to play overseas, and two, it put me in a position when I finally became a coach and work with players, how I can help them not only navigate to try to reach their dreams, but also help them understand that if you have these big dreams and big goals, you might not always make it, but it's going to hopefully put you in a position to be somewhere where you want to be at. Like when I was a kid, I wasn't thinking I want to go play professionally overseas, right? And so it helped me just working my tail off to be able to still reach that type of goal, even if it wasn't the NBA. And I think it gave me great perspective because at the end of the day, the ball is always going to stop bouncing, no matter if you make it to the NBA, you play overseas. And I think it's all the experiences you go through as a young person, somebody in college, and even playing overseas. All those experiences give me not only great knowledge of, one, how to handle failure, but two, how to help others out. And I think as a coach, the X's and O's are very important, but I think how you can impact young men, how you can have an understanding of how to push others to be able to reach their goals too was something that I learned sometimes through my own failures. So I never look at failures as a bad thing. I try to look at them as a lesson, as something I can learn from. And obviously I think when you accomplish your goals, it gives you, one, a great feeling inside, and two, it gives you great confidence, right? And so what I don't want to do when I was a player is when I did fail, I didn't want that to knock my confidence. Because I think confidence as a player and as a person is very important, no matter that if it's sports, if it's business, if it's coaching, you have to have confidence with whatever you do. I think the failures and learning from them, it just allowed me to use those as lessons and to be able to help others. So when they have to go through some of those things, they don't always think of failures as a bad thing. I think the biggest thing is you got to be able to learn from it, though. You can't just move on past it. You learn from it. You use it as a little bit of motivation too. So now when I get into coaching, my end goal obviously is hopefully to be a head coach one day. And so I got to be able to use everything I've gone through, not only in basketball, but in life, to try to accomplish my next set of goals.
It shows a lot. Like you've been talking to us a lot about failure in practices, and we definitely heard that. So you decided to go pro after college. What was the process? Like agents, like you came out of college, you don't have agents like we have right now. How did it happen?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it started with my relationship with Ali. When he got done playing here in 2010, he got an agent and he was playing overseas. And so the first thing I did was reach out to him and asked him how he went about his process. So I was fortunate that me and another guy that was a senior in my class here, Jake Cook, we both were able to get into his agency with the agent that he was under. And so working with him and talking with him first, and then working with him about how to, find the right place for us. It was a unique experience because, like you said, I didn't have an agent when I was in college. And so working with a guy of trying to get to where you want to get to and try to follow your dreams even further was a fun experience. And he helped me get to Germany. And throughout that process, we were always talking about what's the best fit. It's very similar to maybe somebody coming out of high school trying to find the right fit for college, because not every country is going to be the best fit. Not every program is going to be the best fit. Every country has different rules as far as how many Americans or imports can be on their team. And he was a German agent, so he had a lot of ties with German teams. And I think that helped me get placed in Germany. And eventually, when Jake left his Romania team, he was able to come over and play on my team. So I was able to play with a guy I played 4 years in college with. I was able to play 2 years in Germany with. And it was because of the ties we had with our agency. So I would say a lot of it came down to your relationship you have with your teammates, your coaches. Coach Jake was somebody that kind of helped me navigate a little bit of the process because we obviously have had other guys that have gone through it to try to play overseas. So I think a combination of my coaches, my teammates, being able to help me find the right person to be my agent and somebody that they trusted made it a lot easier for me throughout the process. And it wasn't something, I wasn't a guy that was making millions of dollars. So I think when you get to that level, especially in the NBA, your agent's going to even be more important. My agent was a great guy, and they worked hard to try to get me to the best places I could and to be able to play as long as I could. And I am appreciative of them. I appreciate all the relationships I had with people that have put me in a position to be able to play overseas.
Okay, so Germany was kind of your first choice or last choice. Do you have any other options?
Yeah, so Germany, when it came down to it, was, I would say right away, it was probably the first opportunity that came about. Now, I also had shoulder surgery right after my senior year. So I had a torn labrum for 4 years, and I had to get surgery eventually right when my senior year got done. So obviously, teams are going to be a little bit nervous to be able to, one, take somebody that hasn't played overseas yet, that just had surgery. Not every team's going to go for that. And that's something you don't want to hide, right? You want to always be honest as you can. So with your agent and when they're talking to teams, being able to be upfront and honest that, hey, yes, I did have surgery. So I think that first year, there was some opportunities that probably didn't come my way a little bit because of myself just having shoulder surgery. And that was okay with me. I had to understand if I wanted to have surgery, there was going to be always things that happened because of it. So when that opportunity came in Bayer, it was something I was getting to know a little bit of who the coaches were, who the players were, who were some of the players that played at that program. There was a guy from Drake University that played there before me, and he was able to have success and allowed him to move up to different levels overseas. And so I knew it was a great opportunity for me to have, one, the opportunity to play right away, to be able to get the experience, and then hopefully be able to continuously move up and have more and more success throughout my professional career.
Okay, and do you remember your first day? Like
Getting there?
Yeah, you get from the airport from US
Yep.
to Germany. Like, how did it happen?
It's a great question. I remember getting on the plane here, said goodbye to my family, goodbye to some of my close friends, and took that long plane ride. I think it was, however long it was. It was probably one of the longest plane rides I've been on. Landed in Dusseldorf, Germany, which is about probably 30 minutes north of Leverkusen. And it's one of where their local airports are, more on the west side of Germany. And I remember my coach was there when he first picked me up, and that was pretty much the first time I've talked to my coach in person. I was able to talk to my coaches a little bit, obviously, over, emails, not as much like phone, because at that time, like Zooms and WhatsApp wasn't as, I would say it was probably there, but it was probably more over emails. And I remember meeting him for the first time. Now, it was fortunate my coach had obviously worked with a lot of Americans, so he could speak English, like the communication part was totally fine. Was a great coach, both him and my assistant. He brought me to what they call your flat, and then the next thing we did is we went to go pick up my car. So I remember getting to the dealership and learning I was going to have to drive a stick shift. And my coach was like, hey, all right, here you go. And he dropped me off, gave me my car, and he left. And I had never drove a stick shift before in my life. Now, he showed me a couple things, but I remember he's like, the best way to learn is just by doing it. And it was something that kind of stuck with me. I think sometimes when we're learning something new, we always want to know every little thing possible of how to do something. And I'm a big figure it out type of guy. I've learned that as I've gotten older, of sometimes you gotta learn how to figure it out. And like we talked about earlier, you're probably going to fail sometimes. And I remember I got to my first stop sign or stop light, and my car died. Not died, but it stopped. It went off. Yeah, it went stale. And so I was trying to get it back up. I had all these people beeping behind me, and there was some pressure like, hey, you better go. And obviously they don't know I'm a first time in Germany as an American trying to drive a stick shift. And it was great for me to learn just having to do it on my own, how to figure my way home. It gave me great experience. And from there on out with the driving, it actually was really fun to drive stick shift. It was something I obviously never did in the U.S., but it was something that I think I really eventually ended up enjoying. And so I think it took me like an hour to get back home, and it was only about 10 minutes away. I remember pulling up to my apartment and then finally getting into my room, unpacking. And I think I just took a couple couple minutes to just soak everything in. I hadn't met my teammates yet. The other couple Americans hadn't got there yet, so I was the first guy that got there. I was going to meet them and my German teammates the next day. But I remember just taking in the environment. I walked outside, I was in a family neighborhood, so just walked around to see what things are like. And there was obviously some similarities compared to America, but there was also some differences. And that was a cool thing of just being able to experience something that was different than what I was accustomed to. Unless you're in a city that has, a lot of walking places or bike lanes, there wasn't as much where everybody was outside. Everybody was walking, everybody was riding their bike. You didn't actually see a lot of cars. Another thing is how many trains there are. So over in Germany, a big part, and obviously overseas, especially in Europe, trains are so big for transportation. And so even learning how to navigate, how to get to the city without having to drive and actually just take the train was something very cool. And I was surrounded by Dusseldorf, and another city below me was Cologne, which are two pretty big cities in Germany. And so I was able to get back and forth between them. And even the buildings, right? So like how they build their buildings and how they, their architecture, a lot of that stuff's a little different than living in the US. Now, Germany does remind me a lot of kind of the Midwest part of our country. And so there is obviously some similarities, but being able to have the difference, I think it allowed me to see something new. It allowed me to see something that I wasn't accustomed to. And I think as a young man, that's when your growth can happen. Is your growth can't always happen when everything's exactly how you want it to be or how you're used to it. I think being a little bit uncomfortable living in a different country, 8 hours ahead, so how you communicate with people. Didn't have Wi-Fi yet. I didn't have Wi-Fi till the next day, so I couldn't talk to anybody. So it took me a chance where I really got to just have my own thoughts and think about why I did this, why I'm here. It gave me a chance to get away from sometimes all the distractions we have with our phone or the internet, TV, and it allowed me to just soak it all in. I think that was important my first day because that was probably the first time I've ever been that far away from home or from family or from friends. But that's where it did allow me to grow up a little bit more post-college because we're so used to even here. For me, I'm at UNI, I was only 3.5 hours away from home. So if I needed to get back home for an emergency, I could. Where over there, if there was an emergency back home, I wasn't getting back home. And so you had to grow up a little bit, and it gave you a chance to see who you are as a person and what you're capable of.
No, I totally agree. So your family wasn't there. Did you have any roommates?
So first year I was by myself. The other American we lived in kind of an apartment building. He lived on the first floor, I lived on the second floor. So we did live in the same building. My second year, I did live by myself. Now, my first year, when Jay Cook came over, he ended up, because his apartment wasn't ready yet, he ended up living with me for maybe a couple weeks. So I did have a roommate for a little while, but for the most part, I was living by myself.
Okay. And so when was your first practice? Did you start right away, like the next day?
Yeah, so the first year we had a little bit of a boot camp to start. The first day, we didn't really start. I would probably say we had a couple days off where we didn't have team practice yet. I think I got there, it was probably sometime in August, and I think we started practice, like real team practice in September. And then when I got out there, you and the Americans are a little different than sometimes you and the Germans, especially at the level I was. A lot of my German teammates worked throughout the day and then would come later on at night when we'd practice, and they would obviously practice with us. There was a couple that did do it as a professional career, and that's where all the different levels, some, especially when you get to the top level in every country, most of all your teammates, like that's their job. I was in the second league in Germany, so a lot of my German teammates did have either a job, some were still going to school. We had a mixture of a little bit of older guys and a little bit of young guys. So like our young guys were sometimes 17, 18, 19 years old. Some of our older guys were 30 to 35 years old. And then us Americans were usually guys that were just finishing up college, so anywhere from 22 to 24 years old. And so first, I would say the first week it was just more getting used to the city, getting used to where you work out. So us Americans would go over, do a couple workouts every day, some lifting, and then eventually when we got to practicing, we would practice at night. Because since our guys did work throughout the day, we had to practice at 5 p.m. at night.
So you arrive, you practice in the morning, and practice the night. So how does the practice look like?
Yeah, it's unique. I would say it's definitely a lot of skill stuff. A lot of it came down to you would start practice. Obviously, your trainer would work or warm you up so you get your body right. And then we would do a couple warm up drills every day. So a lot of it came down to ball handling, passing, small sided games, so stuff to get your body even more warmed up. We did a lot of shooting in practice and we did a lot of 5-on-5. So they always try to start it where you worked yourself up, and then once you got to 5-on-5, you pretty much were 5-on-5 the rest of practice. And then obviously when you started to get into scouting stuff, especially teams we played against, you spent some of that time like we do here at UNI, where you would work on kind of scout stuff. But over there, you only have so many people on your team, or compared to like here, let's say you have 17, 15 on your team, it's easy to have a scout team. So we didn't spend as much time. We would watch film and we'd have scouts, but we didn't spend as much time always going through like scout team versus main team. A lot of times you focused on you more. And there would be some things, some wrinkles that maybe teams did that you would talk about, but you would more focus on your team than you would sometimes always the other teams. And I think there were some good parts of that. I think there's some things that maybe made it harder when you got into games. But with your limited resources as far as how many people were able to practice, you couldn't always do it where it was just strictly scout team, strictly like your main 5 or your main 8. There would be times that we were able to do it and walk through their plays and stuff like that and even run through them and guard them. But we didn't spend as much time of just 5-on-5, scout team versus main team being able to play.
Okay, but here is more like we do more individual stuff by ourselves, and which is completely different from overseas. What would be the very different, distinctive things from US to Europe, like the different mechanics of the practice?
Yeah, it's a lot of different passing, shooting type drills. So you're almost always moving. I think that was the one thing we did a lot. There was a lot of partner stuff. So if it was you and a partner were running down the sideline on the court about 5 feet from each other, you're passing it back and forth with one hand, and then you get to the other side of the court, and then you go into a ball screen. So they focus a lot on concepts. And I think it's something that you're seeing a lot in the US now. You're seeing more and more teams use a lot of the approach that overseas uses. Because concepts are so important to them, I think they really want to teach you and have you play out of actions and concepts more than running a set every time. If we're working, let's say we're playing 3-on-3 versus a middle ball screen, and just playing out of that and learning how to play out of that concept. Or if it's a zoom action on the sideline, how to play out of that action. So you're seeing that a lot more, obviously, in college and in America now. While it probably wasn't something as prevalent when I was a player of so many concepts, so many small-sided games, you probably spent more time on actions and sets, which can be a good thing, and you obviously always need that stuff. But I think America has used a lot of the approach of overseas basketball and how they develop to be able to help them a lot. But yeah, skill is probably number one. Shoot, pass, dribble. You got to be able to do that overseas. Most guys, no matter if you're a big or a guard, you're probably able to shoot, pass, dribble because they really want to make sure everybody on the floor has those capabilities. Especially a lot of times you're going to see a 5-out offense. You're going to see the floor space. Not as much dribbling always in an offense. It's going to be more playing off passes, cuts, ball movement. Obviously, you're going to have to dribble, but the emphasis of more ball movement and spacing.
So now we go back to your first year. How did it went your first year?
Yes, I think we finished like 10-20 or 9-19 or something in that capability. We didn't make the playoffs. So I think I want to say the top 8 teams made it. So the year was good though. We had some injuries that happened throughout the year, and we weren't, just like you'll see what it's like in America now, having the money in your program is important because you're able to pay players more. So we weren't a team that was a high payroll for our team. So we had to figure it out through, like I said, we had young Germans that hadn't really played much in their professional career, or we had sometimes a little bit more older Germans that kind of played a lot of their professional career already and were getting towards, let's say, the later end of their career. And then you had some guys coming from college that weren't big-time high major players, right? They weren't all-Americans. They weren't guys that, getting asked to make $10,000, $15,000 a month. So, especially in the Pro A level, you had to learn how to navigate that, just like you're seeing a lot of low major, mid-major teams having to learn how to navigate the NIL world. Because if you don't have the money that high majors have or the money that big time overseas programs have, you have to learn how to navigate. And that's when I learned about being able to either move up or move down. And it was a cool concept I learned being overseas that if you were the bottom two teams in your league, you had a chance to move down to the next league. Or if you were the top two teams in your league and you won the championship, you had the opportunity, hopefully, to move up to the top league. So it did put pressure on your team, on your program, but I think it gave you a competitive feel that every game mattered. And that was the one thing I learned overseas. We only played once a week, so every game mattered. You didn't have, like in college even, sometimes you might have 2 or 3 games in a week, so it was easy to, after a loss, knowing you had a game in 2 days, it was a little easier to get motivated and get ready to come back from that loss. Where overseas, you played on the weekends, in mine, and you had to wait till the next weekend. We didn't play in another league where some leagues over there, especially if you're in the top league in a country, you're playing in your country's league and you're probably playing in another league that kind of has a mixture of other countries. So you might have 2 games a week, which allows you to move on, get better, get more experience. And that was something I think as our team, as the season went on, we did get better because we were able to just get more experience. But like anything, we dealt with some injury and we had to learn how to overcome that. And I think we finished well as far as being able to come together close to the end. We just weren't fortunate enough to make the playoffs.
Yeah. And I'm talking about money, like how the ranges change depending like your level. So if you want to talk about what was your salary there?
Yeah, so my first year, obviously with your salary, you're depending on whatever's in your contract, right? Because everybody's contract on the team is going to be a little bit different. So my first year, I think it was like 1,500 euros a month. I got an apartment, I got a car, and then you got some food deals throughout local restaurants where sometimes you can go and eat there once a day. And then a lot of times maybe your gas is paid for. So my first year, it wasn't much, right? I wasn't a high major player. I wasn't a guy that was averaging 20 points. And I would say 50 to 60% of people that go overseas, you're going to have to be overseas for a couple years to try to get to the point that you're making really good money. My goal wasn't at first I need to go and make $1 million. I need to go make $10,000 a month. I knew I was going to have to work and have success first before I did get the money or the salary that I wanted. And so to me, it was more of just, I basically got to save all the money I made because I had a house already and an apartment and a car. I didn't have to worry about all that extra stuff that a lot of times if you're in the U.S., you're having to pay for.
It gives you time
It gives you time.
and ways to save.
Very true.
From your 2 years, what would you say would be like the hardest part of being like in a pro game?
Yeah.
Or a pro game, pro area, like in Europe?
Yeah,
What
I
was
would
the
say
hardest-
number one, obviously, I would say if you ask most, it's going to be being in a different place that you're not used to. So living 8 hours in a whole different country where you can't see your family and friends every day. The other thing, non-basketball, was just how you communicate with your family. Because you're 8 hours ahead, it wasn't like midday you want to call your family. They might be asleep. So you had to kind of learn. I had to put together a schedule of when is the best time to talk to people. So a lot of times it was when I woke up in the morning, I wasn't talking to anybody probably until midday or 2 p.m. because most people were asleep, right? Or you had to stay up late because a lot of times, let's say midnight over there was really 4 o'clock in the afternoon here. When it comes to the basketball part was most of your teammates, at least for me in Germany, they could speak English, right? So you could communicate. It wasn't always perfect between us communication-wise, but I would say the communication part's always going to be something that you're learning how to communicate with your teammates, how to communicate with your coaches. The brand of basketball at that time was different than what I was used to and accustomed to. So that took me a little bit. There is some rules as far as sometimes like different travel rules, flagrant fouls, little rules in basketball in the FIBA that was different compared to what I was used to in the U.S. So especially, say, if you're in a triple threat and you want to step and rip with that non-pivot foot, it's travel. That was everything you're taught in college. Every day you were taught that, right? And so it was a muscle memory. And so I remember my first exhibition scrimmage, I think I got called for 3 travels. So I had to learn you either got a cross step to start or you had to put the dribble down to start on a dribble without getting called for a travel. And then obviously with the rules, depending on your country, we could only have 3 non-Germans on the court at once. So you had to learn how to navigate the substitution stuff too. And obviously that's up to your coach, but understanding if you got 4 Americans, not all 4 can play at the same time. We didn't have it right away. We eventually had 4 Americans when Jake ended up coming over. So we couldn't play all four of us at the same time. So we had to learn, hey, all right, what's the best way to keep a lot of us on the floor, but knowing one person is going to have to come off the floor at a point.
But it's more the coach that decide that.
And it was hard as a player at first, like, why are you taking me out? If we're going to put this other guy in, somebody's going to have to come out. I think as a player, you just had to understand why. It wasn't like coach is taking you out because you messed up or because he thinks you look tired or you're not playing good. It was in order for this guy to come in, somebody else has to come out. And so we kind of learned that when we did get the fourth guy over, how our substitution patterns would be. Or a lot of times you'll see, like overseas, a lot of times the imports, they're usually, and when I say imports, it's just somebody not from that country. So it could be anybody from a different country that came over to Germany. And so you had to just learn is usually those are the better players. Now, when you get to the top league, like the top leagues in Germany, those are where the best Germans are at because that's where they're going to get the most amount of money. So it isn't always that case, and their rules are different because they can have who they want on the floor. They have a certain amount of people they can have on the team, but they can play how they want to. At our level, you had to navigate that, and a lot of times your imports are your best players, but you can't always play all your best players at once. So that substitution pattern the coaches had to do, as a player, you had to learn that it wasn't that you were playing bad while you got subbed out. It was just because of how we have to substitute to make sure everybody's getting in the game.
So that was the hardest part. How this experience changed you as a player or as a coach?
Yeah, I would say playing for any coach is going to change you. And I've been very fortunate in my life to a lot of different coaches that taught me how to do things differently. I think when you're only around one person your whole life, you only learn how to do something one way. And there's so many different ways how to play the game of basketball, how to teach the game of basketball, how to develop players. I think when I played for that coach, he taught me how to do things a little differently than maybe how my high school coach taught me or how my AAU coach taught me or just some of the mentors I had in basketball. There was a lot of really cool things that I was able to take from my coaches in Germany, whether that be sets, whether that be development, whether that be just how they communicate with you and lead you, whether that be how they run their program eventually if I ever want to become a head coach. And I think that's something as all athletes and coaches and young people, being able to, the people you surround yourself with, how can you take little pieces from everybody but be able to put it into your own way, right? Like I can't go and do what somebody else does because that's them. And I got to be able to take little things that maybe can work for me and learn how to utilize those to be able to have the most success I can have.
So we talked about the hardest one, how they changed you, but what was your best moment as being in like an overseas player?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say a lot of it was the stuff probably off the court because we didn't have great success. Both years we were pretty much 10 and 20, if I'm being honest, but it was traveling in Germany, even going to see in Berlin the wall, right? And so being somebody that was German, obviously you have the history of Germany, even dating back to when it wasn't the greatest time to be in Germany. But being able to see some of those monuments, some of those important things in that country and learning where my family is originally from and being able to connect a little bit with that, because when you're in the U.S., my grandparents, they were born in the U.S., so they didn't have living in Germany like their former relatives did. So I never could always talk to them, hey, how was it like in Germany? What's Germany like? So I think living there, learning the culture, learning the people, also learning that they're not really much different than us, right? People are people. They love their family, they work, they have their hobbies, they like to eat, they like to travel. I realize how, yes, we are different because I'm American, you're German, but realizing that we're all humans at the end of the day. And I think we get a bad rep sometimes as Americans. I think other countries can get a bad rep because of sometimes the stuff that's on the news. And the only way I could learn what Germany is to actually physically be there. I can listen to the news, I can look at the newspapers, and I can have somebody else tell me what Germany's like. But I think experiencing their culture, their food, who they are as people was probably the most important thing to me and probably the most fulfilling thing, because I realized there is other things that are good outside of the U.S., like even some of the food I ate over there, or some of the drinks I had, or how they got around, how they interact with each other, some of their holidays they celebrate that we don't celebrate. It was really cool and eye-opening, and it allowed me to have an appreciation for it more. And I think it's something eventually, as I get a little bit older, if I can ever go back and go and see other countries. I think it did make me want to travel more. And I think that's something that obviously to travel, you got to have some money, right? You got to be able to afford to travel. But it's something I think as a young man, being able to travel abroad, being able to go see the country in other countries is really important. I think it makes you a better person because you realize with your own eyes what other things are like.
Totally. And this is why basketball overseas is like impressive,
Mhm.
interesting to go through and
Yes.
play. Was there a moment you thought, this is why I chased this dream?
Yeah, it was just being able to just be in a different country and play basketball. I
Yeah.
know it sounds like simple, but you had grown up in your little kid's gym in St. Paul, Minnesota, and then traveling around the country for AU, and then traveling around the country for college and high school. But I think there it gave you a different experience of being in even different type of gyms, right? Their floors have handball lines on them or different sports lines, and it was cool to see how their fans react, how their fans cheer, because they're a lot more different as far as they sometimes have noisemakers, they might have fire. We had a bunch of dogs always at our game. So there are so many things so different compared to what it is like in the US. But then there was also very similar things that I got out of it also. But it was great, man. It taught me the game in a different lens. It gave me an experience that if I never went and just did it, I don't know what it would have been like. And I remember people would ask me, why did you only play 2 years? And it was something that I had to move on to the next part of my life and my next career as far as getting into training, getting into coaching. But I was also good with it. I think that's something as a player, everybody's always like, how do you know when you're done? And I think it's very hard for a lot of players to just finally be done. But I knew that in college, overseas, I gave it everything I had. And I think if you're always able to give everything you have, you always can feel good about it once you're done. You're not going to have those regrets.
Okay, so what advice would you give the college players who wants to play professionally overseas?
Yeah. I would say one, do some research on your own of just where you'd want to go. And don't be tied down to a specific country because there might be another one that opens up that is a good experience, right? I think also understanding what's the best country for you. And the reason why I bring that up is every country you hear or know about, you're going to have positives and negatives to it. And I think knowing what you want to get out of it is also important. Where if it's, I want to play overseas and hopefully have a chance to play professionally in America, let's say in the NBA, where do guys that have gone from overseas to the NBA, what countries are they mostly in? Usually it's going to be in some of those top leagues. A lot of times those players are the ones that end up making it to the NBA. And so that's obviously something that's important to you. I think finding a place where the culture, the food, the people, what is most important to you. I had a buddy that ended up playing in Afghanistan, and he didn't want his girlfriend coming over there because of certain reasons. That was just his opinion on not wanting her over. Not to say it's a bad country. He enjoyed it. He loved being over there, but he wanted to be more by himself in that moment than he would having his family over. I think every country has their pros, has their cons. And so I think it's as a player figuring out what do you want. It's kind of like when you're going through the college recruiting process of what's your pros and cons. Now, you can't always dictate where you go to college and get the offer from either, right? So maybe you only have a couple offer opportunities to play overseas. Then maybe if you have three, you're thinking about what are the pros and cons to every country. Obviously, you're looking at salary, you're looking at the different things you get in your contract, whether that be apartment, housing, food, cars, whether that be how good's the coach. Does the coach help people get to the next level they want to get to? How is it, how your teammates going to be? What are the rules as far as imports, exports? How many let's say in Germany, how many non-Germans can be on your team? Because all that stuff can matter. But I think at the end of the day, it's about where you can have the best experience. And if playing is most important, where are you going to be able to play? Very similar to the recruitment in college, it's just in a different country and it's away from America. So the recruiting process I did in college, there was some similarities when it came to professionally because I had to think about what was the most important things to me and what am I trying to get out of this experience.
Okay. And when you think back to your first overseas games or like a season, what's something you wish someone had told you before going?
That's a great question. You wish somebody would have told you that every single place you go to can be different. So even the teams in the same league, how they go about their stuff is different. How different leagues are different. How different people on your team are going to have different contracts. I wish I would have known a little bit more about if you're making in an agency and you're the top money guy that's making the most amount of money, your agents are going to probably work harder for you. If you're a low money guy, you're not bringing in as much money to the agency, your agents probably aren't going to work as hard for you, right? And so I wish I would have more realized that. I should have understood and known that. But I think understanding that you have to win and then you have to have stats in order to move up. Winning's probably going to be the most important thing, because you could have great stats, but you're on a bad team, you're probably not getting a better job now. But if you're on a winning team and you have solid stats, you're probably able to move up. It's very similar when you look at recruiting high school kids. There's some high school kids that maybe they're on a bad team and maybe they're averaging 25 points. You're like, oh man, that guy's got good stats. Versus a kid that's on a really good team averaging 15 points. Obviously, most people are going to take 25, but playing on a really good team and winning and having 15 points has a lot more weight than playing on a bad team and averaging 25 points.
Yeah, that's more impact.
More impactful. So I think I wish I would have understood that better, of understanding, all right, what do I need to do in order to move up more? I think as all players, you're just thinking, hey man, I got to be able to score. I got to be able to have really good stats, and that's going to help me get the next job. But it's a lot of times it's more the opposite. It's you got to be able to win. And so whatever you can do as a player on your team to help your team win, and then the stats obviously usually come along with that too. So I think I wish I would have known, like, winning is the most important thing. And I think it's like that everywhere, but you don't always know overseas because you're dealing with, at that time, money being paid and understanding it's a new thing. So I wish I would have bought into and understood more that winning is the most important thing. I wanted to win every game, right? And so it's great that I do, but do all my teammates. And so I should have done a better job as one of the main guys of how do you push your teammates to want to win more than worry about the stats too.
Okay. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I like to end up with last question.
Yep.
When you hear the title Beyond the Contract, what does that mean to you?
I would say what that means to me is, obviously, as a player, you get the contract and you look at what you're making, you look at what's in the contract, you look at all the stuff that comes about it. But I think beyond the contract is everything you get out of playing overseas and the experiences you get that shape you for the rest of your life. And so, yes, like the money you make is great, the cars that you get to drive, the apartments and the food is great, but I think the experience is the stuff that's beyond the contract, because at the end of the day, for me, I'm a big experience guy. Our lives are shaped through the experiences we go through, and I think you become who you are through those experiences. So I knew at the end of the day, basketball wasn't going to last forever. It obviously overseas only lasted 2 years for me. Some people it might last 5 years. Some people it might last 10 to 15. But it's going to be done at some point. And so I wanted to be able to use the experiences to not only make me a better person, but shape me for the rest of my life leading forward. Especially I knew I was going to get into coaching. And so being able to use some of that stuff for when I get into coaching, whether that be eventually hopefully recruiting a kid from overseas, whether that be the connections I made that maybe in the long run, it will come back to me. I remember being in the gym working out, and there was a college coach over there recruiting a girl in our program. And I was like, wow, there's college coaches that come over here to see work out and play, to try to get them over. So I think it was just using my experiences, which isn't in the contract, right? Like your experiences, it has nothing to do with what they pay you or what they give you. It's what you get out of everything you did in your time there.
Mark, I really appreciate you for sharing your story. It was really interesting and really helpful. Thank you again, and I hope to see you another time.
Of course, man. No problem at all.
That's it for today's episode of Beyond the Contract. If you enjoyed it, make sure to follow and share. And remember, the contract is just the beginning. I'll see you next time.